I do most of it myself. Sometimes though, when we have a deadline, you can't read the same thing over and over again, you know?
Right.
And so I'm like, oh, I love to have someone to do proofing for me. And so we used to have some acquisition editors throughout our time with the company. And those were people that we had hired to do it. Now it seems to be more like I have people who want to do a beta read for me, or someone who just is like, hey,
Perfect.
you know what, you've already edited and did all stuff. I would proof it for him. Like, that's great. I would love another set of eyes before it comes out, and I just don't want to miss anything again. So yeah, so usually it's me, one other person. Joe will look over it. We'll have a couple beta readers. But yeah, knowing you need a team to make all these graphics and do all the posts, but also knowing you have the confines of a much smaller budget. And so
Right.
it's, well, you know, how can I compensate someone if they are going to help us out? If I can't give them the paycheck that a normal publisher would, can I give them free copies of books? Can I give them a percentage of sales? And I think
Right.
that's what indies tend to find, you know, workarounds in that regard.
Was there a time when you kind of thought, all right, you know what? I just realized I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. I don't know how I'm going to get to the next step or get to that final product. Like, was there a time when that happened, or is it sort of just balls to the walls and
I
that
will
was never a
just say,
factor?
no, it was 100%. I always was going to succeed. No, there was definitely times where I did have that moment where I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, this exactly what you said. This is like massive. How can I ever possibly do all this? But I think I've gotten really good at reframing as I get older. So in my head now, you know, even like you said, looking back with some of the mistakes that I make, I used to think that, these mistakes would be all done. Like I wouldn't have any more problems once I got this far along in the game, right? But you realize since it's always evolving, there's always something new coming. You're constantly learning. And so I get good at now reframing and saying, you know what? I just am really good at finding ways that don't work. And I persevere and keep going. I can't remember who said it, but, you know, the light bulb, right? They found a
Yeah, I was
thousand
gonna
ways
say,
not
yeah,
to make a light bulb. But I think as long as you keep going, and that was my thing, perseverance. And so I was like, okay, this really sucks. I bit off way more than I can chew. You know, it's me and Joe. Can we bring someone else on? What could we do? And as long as we always kept going and always had like an end goal vision, I think that's important too. We made it, you know, and you can overcome that. I think you have to have a solid vision though, for sure, and a higher ideal. And if you have that, you can really get through anything, even if you have lull periods where, you know, you have to close down shop. Like sometimes we've had things where we had a book plan and we're like, you know what, we have to just put it on pause. It's not going to work out. We had a best of, we were going to do a decade anniversary. We're going to have this whole books of blood, and it was going to be this big thing. And I started getting some of the rights from authors all the way back from Night Terrors and the first DOA.
Oh wow.
We could make this big, you know, amalgamation of everything.
Yeah.
You know, an accident happened, you know, got sick. We had to do some juggling with a move. And I just thought it's just too much. So we put it on hold. We never came back to it, but look at all the other good stuff we have. So it's not like the company ended. Maybe we'll just do a 20-year when we hit our 20-year. So I think you become very flexible, and you have to have that vision and perseverance.
Perfect. And was there a time through that there was any major thing that kind of, I mean, it sounds like that could have just as easily brought, you know, been the one card, the weak card to bring the house down regarding, you know, your Decade of Decadence book. Was there anything like that that you kind of did get hit up against where you're like, I'm not so sure about this, but obviously you worked through it and you made it work?
Yeah, there was. So there was definitely, so I even just last year, I've had these terrible injuries. When you certain professions you don't want, but like injuries to your hand, right, where you're in a cast. So I've had two different ones like that where I've been like, I just don't know if I can do this. But I went through and I would have one hand in a cast and I just typed with one finger, you know.
Yeah.
We had times with money troubles, you know, and then I found out a better way. You know, there's things for writers, and I do a podcast with Lucy Leitner called Horror Business, where we share some of our what we've learned through our time doing this. So maybe people don't have to make as many mistakes as us, whether they want to be publishers or independent writers. And I found there are some, I don't want to say tricks, but there are some tax advantages that people don't always just tell you about, and ways that you could leverage debt and you could fund yourself and you could basically bankroll your business so you didn't have to be bankrupt and go out and not also put your own personal life in debt. So those were ways that I found to overcome it. But yeah, definitely. So between accidents, money troubles, stuff like that. Every once in a while, you've got like, well, in this culture, I don't know if I want to call it cancel culture, but everyone's very touchy,
Well, that's
and we live
exactly
in a
what it is.
world
Yeah.
very touchy, right? And we live in a world of horror, which predominantly is supposed to make people feel as uncomfortable as possible.
Right.
I like to think that there's a reason for the story. And if a story is making you uncomfortable, maybe there's a lesson to learn in it. It doesn't necessarily mean that what we're writing about is good, though, you know, the good thing, but these authors could get canceled at any moment. People could be picking them apart. They could go off the deep rail. So you might have that as an author, and you might think that's the end of the world. Like, I'm sorry, if you're the publisher and an author loses it, or someone wants to cancel your book, and you just gotta like step back and say, okay, wait a second. This is one person, and you have a whole library of work that you've done and a brand that you are. You just got to let that stuff go. But that does feel very daunting. You feel like, well, I can't come back from this one, but you can. So all those things I think happen. They happen to me. I'm sure as you write more, they can happen to you, you know, but you're just going to have a vision and a goal, and people know who Rick is. You know, the more I think you're out here and the more you do these podcasts and show your personality, it circumvents that, you know, to a point you can start to alleviate some of those problems that could come your way. But yeah, those are some of the things we butted up against.